Hello, everybody. How are you? My name is Fabio, and I work as a digital marketing consultant. For this interview, we will have the participation of Ade Rodrigues, without camera, founder of Sexshop Só Prazer e Companhia, and Diane Diaz, and of course, Debra Pascali-Bonaro. Hi, Debra.
Hello, Fabio. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here with all of you.
The honor is ours. So I'm going to start explaining what's a doula. Doula is a trained professional who provides continuous physical and emotional and informational support to their clients before, during, and shortly after childbirth to help them achieve the healthiest, most satisfying experience possible, just like antepartum care or breastfeeding teachings. Debra Pascali-Bonaro is a world-renowned speaker, author, filmmaker, doula trainer, as I can research since 1994, and above all, an activist for the public awareness to the better quality of life and female sexuality. Debra, do you agree with this description? Please tell us more about your work.
So let me tell you a little bit more about orgasmic birth, right? Because I feel like that's the main interest here. So, orgasmic birth is something, as you said, I've been a doula for more than 30 years. And in being with many, many people in birth, I saw so many people had joy, pleasure, connection, and a few of them really experienced some bliss. And that sent me on a journey to really look at all we had been told, because the culture talks about pain and fear and more pain. And we don't really have a language for pleasure in birth. So I often, as I learned more about birth, I say that we sterilized birth. We took away all the emotions, the sacredness, but we also disconnected birth from a woman, a birthing person's sexuality. So orgasmic birth is to reconnect that. It's to help people prepare for birth in its fullness, to explore the physical, emotional, spiritual, and sexual aspects of childbirth. Orgasmic birth is to return a language of pleasure that includes power, bliss, joy, sensuality, lusciousness, transformation, sacred ritual, and yes, sometimes an orgasm experienced in childbirth. Elizabeth Davis, a wonderful midwife, and I wrote the book Orgasmic Birth. And in that, we define orgasmic birth to include the people that have a birthgasm, but to be broad enough for any person that birth is in their power and experiences pleasure in childbirth. And for us, it's important that orgasmic birth does not only include orgasm. Women in childbirth have enough to do without having something else they have to achieve to feel they had a positive birth. But we also know that many women experienced orgasm when they weren't expecting it. For some, this can be an added joy, but for many, it can be triggering and it can be bringing them a lot of shame. So we think that it's very important that we talk about the sexuality of birth, and that birth can, for some people, include an orgasm. For many people listening, this may seem hard to believe because all they've experienced or heard is pain in childbirth. But when we think of our current practices, they often require women to be laying in a bed, laying on their back for childbirth. But when we look at birth at home, in birth centers with midwives, women are usually moving, dancing, leaning forward, finding their own rhythms and finding comfort in different positions. We always say, right, the energy that makes the baby is the same energy we need to birth the baby. And so when we think of this, loving through labor makes sense. And partners, you know how to turn people on, how to bring those hormones of love up. And we need the same hormones for female orgasm as we need for childbirth.
Talking about the hormones, it's clear in your work that indiscriminate use of Pitocin in hospitals, the synthetic oxytocin, can bring risks and increasing pain during labor. What would be the alternatives for a healthy birth and with less pain, of course?
I always say every person should have a list of 10 ways that they have their own natural oxytocin to flow. And often this is eye contact, kissing, sensual touching, nipple stimulation, masturbation, vibrators, dancing, but each person can create their own list. But our bodies are made to produce oxytocin when we feel safe, when we feel private, when we feel unobserved, and we feel sexy and loved.
Okay, great. Tell us more about the vibrators.
So I think it's important to also say that the baby putting pressure into the vagina is part of what helps make more oxytocin. So when I said when people lay back, they have a longer, harder labor, we need to be in positions to put the pressure into that vagina and pelvic floor. And then if we add clitoral stimulation to that, the clitoris is 8,000 nerve endings. We only think of the tip, but all the legs and the clitoral complex go through the labia and the vagina. So putting stimulus on the clitoris with sex toys, with masturbation, with whatever can turn you on is a great added bonus to bring more oxytocin through the body. And pleasure and pain and pleasure travel on the same pathway. So women that are doing clitoral stimulation often are feeling pleasure and either less or no pain.
Para a maioria das mães que tiveram parto natural, a dor está longe de ser considerada um mito? Também há dor no parto orgásmico?
So I think it's important to say that of all the many thousands and thousands of people I've spoken with, some people would never call it pain. They may have had challenge, it may have been hard work, they may have many emotions in the process, but they're also finding comfort and support. And they may have a lot of pleasure in the things that they're doing to support that. There are other people that have had a lot of pain in birth, and then all of a sudden, the biggest orgasm of their life arrived. So orgasmic birth is not to say that there's no pain, but it is to say that the medical system putting people down, restricting people's movement, stripping away the sensuality and sexuality of birth, I think is causing more pain. And when we can prepare for birth in a different way, we can have a different experience. And for most people, they can cope with the challenge of labor and find love and pleasure and maybe an orgasmic orgasm too. Maybe not.
Maybe.
We don't want people to think that there's always a birthgasm. I think as people, we can all say we can have wonderful pleasure even without the orgasm many times. And so there is this deep love and connection that we can experience in birth for all people.
Debra, you were saying that some couples tell about very pain during labor. So, but is surprised with a beautiful orgasm during labor, during childbirth. How this is possible? How?
Because labor for most people is hours, if not a day. And so within that time, we can experience all different things. I think it's important not to say that orgasmic birth is pain-free birth, because everyone feels things differently. But I think it's important to know that within the time that you labor and birth, there are many different feelings, many different things that are possible. You saw our film. We included the story of Helen. She's a survivor of sexual abuse.
Yeah.
I think we must honor that for many women, that they may have past trauma, they may have past abuse. And birth can either be a moment, like for Helen, of great reclaiming of their power, their body, of having that orgasmic birth, but without the right care, without the right preparation. Too many women are re-traumatized, or even some women say birth was like a rape, because without respectful care, without the right private, safe environment, birth is going to be different things to different people. So I think we always have to be aware that people's past and their history is also coming into birth.
Fábio, então, agora ouvindo a fala da Debra, inevitavelmente a gente suscita, né, outras dúvidas também, né? Eu tenho duas questões, mas se for possível, eu gostaria de acrescentar apenas mais uma, que aí eu fiquei um pouco na dúvida. Então, é uma curiosidade, né? O quanto o nível sociocultural pode influenciar na decisão de uma mulher pelo parto em casa, pelo parto orgásmico, e pelo que eu entendi, me corrija, por favor, se eu estiver errada, a proposta também é que o parto orgásmico ele seja uma experiência também, com várias sensações, né? E essas sensações tendem a ser prazerosas, mas existe essa possibilidade de que esse nível sociocultural tem alguma influência na decisão?
Yes, I agree. I think that home birth is often influenced by what that person's own family, how were they born, what have they heard about birth, and what have they been conditioned to think about birth. At least in the US, I know that we have a rising rate of home birth now, as more people are saying, especially during COVID, why do you want to give birth where sick people are? And more people are questioning that our system causes problems. We have a problem with a higher rate of maternal mortality and complications that we know are an overuse of technology, things that could be beneficial for some people, when applied to all people, can create harm. So more and more people now are beginning to question, where is the safest place for them to give birth? And for some people, it is home. For some people, it is hospital. It's a very personal decision, along with considering what might be any risk factors that they may have with their health that exist prior or during pregnancy.
A pergunta que eu tenho até um pouco... faz até um pouco de referência a essa que a gente acabou de sair. A gente tem um grupo de mulheres mundialmente, né? É um grupo pequeno, mas eu não sei se é pelo nível de pesquisa que a gente tem feito ou lido nos últimos tempos, que são as mulheres que têm medo de parto, ou medo extremo de parto. Então, a minha pergunta é meio que para esse grupo de mulheres. A maternidade para muitas mulheres é um pouco assustadora, ainda mais para quem vai ser mãe de primeira viagem e ainda não consegue ter uma noção de um parto normal. Sendo assim, o orgasmo no parto seria uma alternativa para minimizar a dor? E aí seria muito dentro desse grupo de mulheres que tem medo de parto.
Definitely. I think that during pregnancy, it's a time to prepare. And I think for many people, they haven't had good sexual education. It's a time to really expand what women know about their bodies, to help people to feel safe in their bodies and with their sexuality, and with learning all about childbirth. There's so much to celebrate in the process when we address the fear and replace it with knowledge and things that you can do to move from pain to power with pleasure.
Então, eu tinha uma outra pergunta, mas ela já foi respondida, né? Que é sobre a possibilidade de qualquer mulher não sentir dor no parto. Ela já tratou sobre isso. Então, eu queria levantar uma outra, né? O parto orgásmico como uma grande experiência, uma riqueza de sensações para a mulher e para o bebê. O bebê também capta tudo isso, todas essas vantagens também. O bebê de parto normal, de parto orgásmico, ele também vai se beneficiar?
Boa pergunta, Dê. Foi ótimo.
So I think it's always important to consider what birth is like for the baby. And we know that no matter how or where someone births, that oxytocin that's being produced is also surrounding the baby and helping the baby to be born in love, to establish that first bonding, that first looks, that first feeding. So we know this is easiest to have those hormones at their peaks when birth is more natural, or as you say, normal. And that's easiest in home-like environments. I hope one day all hospitals would create a home birth in the hospital for people that need extra medical care. But when a cesarean is necessary, sometimes that's life-saving for a mother or a baby. We have to look at how can we keep the oxytocin flowing there. So I teach people how to have a pleasurable, love-filled birth in any setting. But on the other side, as an activist, I have to say we should only be using these interventions when they're really needed. And I know in the United States and in Brazil, we do too many cesareans on healthy people, and that needs to stop. People need to understand there's no reason to put people at risk and create a gap in the hormones that we can then fill if we don't really need to. So sorry, it's kind of like 2 points of that question, because I think when it's needed, we have to do all we can to make it the safest and still the best experience and get our hormones to fill the gaps. But I think we have to really advocate not to have gaps when we don't need them, and use pleasure to make that experience positive for both mother and baby. Babies want to be bathed in love hormones, not stress hormones.
So here in Brazil, we have a discussion. Actually, some politicians are trying to change some laws or to watch if the laws are being respected. So here in Brazil, actually, there's a discussion about women's right to choose between natural birth, childbirth, or cesarean public health system. Despite our health system is one of the largest public health systems in the world, many obstetricians fear opting for a vaginal delivery. As I said, a normal delivery, a normal one, in a public hospital due to the lack of anesthesia, okay, and ultrasound for cardiotocography, right. And how these conditions really affect the work of a doula and a midwife. Because
so you're saying they don't want, I don't understand, they don't want to have a normal birth, or they do?
The obstetrics, they fear option to a vaginal birth in a public hospital because only few public hospitals in Brazil, the greatest, the large ones, the greatest one, have ultrasound tocography, and some of them there's a risk of lack of anesthesia. So obstetricians normally say to said that you're gonna have a cesarean because I'm afraid we have no ultrasound. How it looks for you?
Yeah, I mean, that for me feels like that's a human rights violation, because cesarean, again, is a valuable surgery for the few people that need it. But to overuse major abdominal surgery is going to put many other people at risk. And to have, as you call, a normal birth, I would say a physiologic birth, a birth that happens in a woman's body with her own abilities, right? If we support that with doulas, with movement, with access to water, lots of people can cope very well and don't need added anesthesia. When pain becomes suffering, then I think having medication is also important. But when you really provide all the ways that we can provide comfort, which rarely does a hospital do, then so many more people will not suffer in childbirth. They will be able to cope with and even find comfort and pleasure. So an example for you in understanding female sexuality in this is that the clitoris is in the front of the body. When women lay on their back and the baby comes down, it's not going to give pressure into the clitoris. It's not going to use gravity to push the pelvic floor and create more oxytocin. It's like a loop. That pressure there puts the feedback to the brain produces more oxytocin. Oxytocin, beta endorphin, other hormones are designed to keep people so that they feel comfort and pleasure and can manage the intensity of childbirth. So if we don't change our practices and give women the freedom to move and understand that when you lean forward and the baby's head comes down and into the clitoral tissues, then there's swelling, then there's lubrication, then there's more hormones, and at least if not an orgasm, there's more a sense of fullness and pleasure. Our current birthing practices are broken. They are causing a lot of the pain we experience. And it gets me upset to say that doctors feel a cesarean is better. Better than what? What isn't better? Helping to understand women's bodies, to connect the sexuality of birth, and prepare women and men and all people that are going to be present in birth for all the ways we can move and dance and bring our love and find joy and add doulas to the team and have more midwives.
I think it's important to say that women cannot feel pressure to have an orgasm. They don't have to feel shame
No.
or guilty for don't having an orgasm.
Correct.
Okay.
No, it shouldn't
It's
be a
already a lot of
performance
pressure.
standard.
There is a lot of pressure.
No pressure.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we want people to know that if it happens, they shouldn't have shame. But if it doesn't happen, they shouldn't have shame either. But that women should have the freedom of movement and expression and privacy so that they can birth in their way. And for some women, that is to masturbate or kiss or touch or have that. But for other women, it's dancing to the best music that they love, or singing a song, or being held in the arms of their partner. I think everybody should define orgasmic birth for themselves. What does that mean to you? And then you'll achieve what you want with no one else's standard. No one should set the standard for birth.
De acordo com todos esses anos de experiências que ela tem aí como doula, qual a diferença entre um orgasmo sexual para um orgasmo na hora do parto? Há um tempo? É mais demorado?
I think if we ask this question to people in life, their definition could all vary, right? I think everyone, and as women, we know we can have many different types of orgasms on any day, and they can last for shorter or longer. So this is a question that's very hard to answer. I can tell you that some people had a birthgasm that they said was the biggest orgasm of their life, because they felt it was so expansive that they were surrounded in divine love. For many people, the type of orgasm they feel in birth is just a love-filled, knowing it's not, it's a part of our sexuality, but I think we have to be careful, because some people that think of sex and a baby goes like, no, I can't put that together. Or sex and motherhood, I can't put that together. So most people, because of all of our taboos and that, really express it as just this loving expansion. And no one has ever clarified the time, because when you're in labor, you have so many hormones flowing. We call it liminal space. Time doesn't make sense. You're in more of a trance space. So I don't think anyone's ever captured, is it longer in labor or not? But we're all individual, and everybody's orgasmic birth is different for them.
We are almost getting to the end of the interview, and I say to you, it's a surprise to me that I could talk with you with this terrible English of mine. So I thank you so very much for your patience. There's a lot of grammar errors.
You did awesome. And if I could just say to everyone listening that if people are pregnant, I really wish you a positive, pleasurable, orgasmic birth as you define it, and encourage you to get more information. I think that we haven't publicly connected sexuality and birth, and we haven't prepared people in ways that help you find pleasure. But I also say to our doctors, nurses, midwives, that we haven't prepared them either. The New York Times last week ran an article that the clitoris is the most understudied organ in the world. And they interviewed doctors who never even talked about it in medical training. And so if we can't talk about the clitoris in life, if we're not preparing our doctors to see the sexuality of birth, We have a broken system, and together we must heal it. We must educate. We must change this paradigm of birth, because we're creating pain. We're creating more poor outcomes. And we know from science that there are better ways. And so be your own advocate, do your own research, define orgasmic birth, and birth in your love and pleasure.
Ade, do you want to finish with some observation?
Yes. Primeiramente, agradecer pelo tempo dela, pela disponibilidade, por ter jogado tanta luz, né, em cima de um tema que nos causa um certo estranhamento, né, mas a partir dos esclarecimentos, a gente consegue já imaginar um parto orgásmico como sendo uma alternativa que a mulher tem o direito, né, de saber, de conhecer e quem sabe escolher.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
viewers.
Thank you.